Imagine committing the same exact crime as somebody else, but receiving a far heavier penalty. This is what's happening to the African American communities in Florida with criminal enhancements. Laws like the 1,000 feet from a school or church that only seem to be implemented when the person being arrested is African American. Today we're in Pinellas County, Florida. That's the St. Petersburg area, which is about 10% African American. However, these types of charges, 66 to 100% of the people charged are African American. The laws we're talking about are the 1,000 feet from a church or a school enhancement charges. These charges ensure that certain types of activities don't happen near schools or churches or other areas like parks. It's by enhancing the charges in these areas that you would in theory guarantee that schools, parks, and churches would be safe areas free from certain types of crimes. And while it seems like the intended purpose of this law was to create safe areas in the community, the reality is that these charges, these enhancements, in real life practice are only applied to African Americans, and many times when whites commit these same crimes and they're within 1,000 feet of a church or a school, it's easily overlooked. This has created a situation where it has become a blacks only crime. Seems like only blacks are charged with this particular crime. In Pinellas County, 66% of the people that are charged with possession within 1,000 feet of a school are black. And keep in mind that blacks are only 10% of this area's population. Well, maybe drugs are more common among the African American community, right? Well, that would be an interesting concept considering that whites in Pinellas County are significantly more likely to overdose than blacks. If the overdose crisis in Pinellas County is happening among the white population, why are the majority of the people being arrested with criminal enhancements for possession among the African American community? In the case of possession charges within 1,000 feet of a park, 100% of the arrests are African Americans. Interesting considering that there are only 10% of the population in a county where the white population is the one that's suffering the most from overdoses. In the next county over, Manatee County, this gentleman right here, by the name of Gerald, was recently arrested for trafficking fentanyl, which is the most likely to actually cause overdoses. African Americans in this area seem to control mostly the synthetic. This individual here was arrested in Manatee County for possession or sale of synthetics. Michael, also in Manatee County, is black and he was charged with the 1,000-foot law. The problem is that mostly these criminal enhancements seem to only be applied to African Americans. But it isn't just in Pinellas County where you have this problem. It seems that every single county you hit in Florida has the same problem. Back to Manatee County, Mr. White by last name but Mr. Black by race was arrested for the 1,000-foot law as well. The issue is if you were to browse county by county in Florida through arrest records, you would notice that 60 to 80% of people being arrested with the 1,000-foot law enhancements are African American. It's the same thing in Manatee, Pinellas, DeSoto, Henry, on and on. If you are black and you are caught with possession, law enforcement does their due diligence to ensure that African Americans receive that enhancement when whites that are charged with the same crime don't receive that enhancement. One of the most common things that's happening in agencies in Florida is that they want to pin the homeless population to certain areas on arrest records. This is a common practice for many counties, in particular Sarasota County, where when a homeless person is arrested and they're transient, their address is linked in to a nearby homeless camp, whether they live there or not. And by doing this, on the court documents, when somebody is transient and arrested, which is predominantly the white population, they don't receive those enhancements, and it doesn't appear like their address is within 1,000 feet of a church or any other type of building that could give them those enhancements. Since after all, most of the junkie shooting ranges that exist in Florida, places where the homeless that are junkies and shooting up hang out, are going to be in areas that are for sure not within those boundaries, which makes it impossible for African Americans to arrest the dealers in those areas and charge them with the enhancements. The real issue lies in how African American communities are policed. So while African Americans are consistently being given enhancements for criminal possessions that equal longer prison sentences, many times in these white homeless areas where people are shooting up constantly, law enforcement always turns a blind eye to their wide open markets or consumption, leaving the African American people in a very vulnerable position because they're committing the same exact crime as the whites, but the criminal penalties are heavier. I am by no means excusing these individuals' behaviors by engaging in these activities. I'm just making it clear that when they do it, they're not being charged fairly. Most likely, they're receiving these criminal enhancements, which leads to the homeless, the widows, and of course the orphans of tomorrow, since these African Americans, when they get caught doing the same exact thing that other people are doing, receive far lengthier prison sentences. One of the most overlooked aspects about racial profiling isn't so much who's being targeted, but who is being overlooked. In the case of Pinellas County, for example, if the white community is significantly more propense to addiction and overdoses than the blacks, then law enforcement should in theory be more proactive about finding whites engaging in those activities, not African Americans. But the complete opposite is true, particularly in St. Petersburg, Florida, along the islands. These areas specifically profile African Americans, targeting them even though they're not at the core of the addiction problem. And it is true that proportionally more people are more likely to do other things than others. For example, we know from drug overdose rates that the African American community is 30 to 100% less likely to overdose. But we're not talking 600% increments. We're not talking 1,000% increments. We're talking, a reasonable variation between races on propensity to certain criminal activities. Rarely does that go above 100% more propensity. So it is possible, for example, like with overdoses. We see more whites overdosing than blacks and Hispanics, sometimes at a rate of 2 to 1. That's very high. They're much more propense to it. But in the case of African Americans selling, is it really a rate of 10 to 1, 6 to 1? That doesn't even make sense. The issue remains that these 1,000-foot enhancement laws are rarely applied to whites, with only rare exceptions. Take this white individual in Manatee County who was charged with possession of a weapon within 1,000 feet of a school. Superficially looking at this case, the issue is that he displayed a weapon within the proximity of a school or within a school, and somebody called law enforcement. That's the most likely scenario for this arrest. I would pull the body cam footage, except for Manatee County is taking about 1 year to provide those at the moment. The real issue is that whites rarely get these criminal enhancements unless something absolutely insane happens, like this individual who displayed a weapon at a school. Still in Manatee County, this is Dante. He received a black-only charge of 1,000-foot enhancement. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of people that are being arrested in Manatee County as well for the 1,000-foot enhancements happen to be African Americans. I did some diligent research on Manatee County arrests, and overwhelmingly African Americans, like this individual here, are the ones that are being charged with the 1,000-foot law. He, in his case, 1,000 feet from a church. In Manatee County, Florida, African Americans also have less propensity to overdosing than whites, so exactly what is the point? To be fair, there was one white person who was arrested for the 1,000-foot law in Manatee County. This individual here is listed as white by race. His name is Michael as well, and he was charged with a 1,000-foot law enhancement. However, despite the fact his race is white, his complexion kind of is African American. Pinellas County goes even further. They have a law that's 1,000 feet from a business, and African Americans are arrested at a ratio of 700% more than whites. Now, what's interesting about this law is the vast majority of homeless arrests happens when they fail to leave or vacate a business, and many times they have possession, but they're never charged with this enhancement unless they're black. It's a real freaking shame how blatant this problem is in Florida and how little proactive behavior law enforcement shows to address this issue. There was one white girl recently in Pinellas County who did receive an enhancement for the 1,000-foot law, but she had an onslaught of criminal charges, And it seems with the amount of different things she had going on, it made sense for law enforcement to dig deeper into whatever the crap she had going on. This is Shayna. She was arrested unarmed in a structure while committing a petty theft in Manatee County. She's most likely homeless. She's been arrested with trespassing charges more than once. And her issue clearly denotes to addiction and homelessness. You've never heard of a criminal enhancement for 1,000 feet from a business when a homeless person gets arrested for trespassing and possession. It's unheard of. Now, while law enforcement disproportionately targets African Americans, homeless individuals, when they're arrested many times, is for refusing to leave a property. Now, that's a fairly self-inflicted charge, and that all you have to do is just leave and not get arrested. This individual here, we interviewed him for our YouTube channel, was recently arrested for refusing to leave a site, a normal charge for homeless people. Meet Peter out of Manatee County. He was recently arrested for misusing 911 to make a false report, and he got the beat down as well. Just recently, Peggy was arrested in Manatee County for refusing to leave a property. It's kind of a thing that happens quite often to homeless people. Isn't that they're arrested for trespassing. They're arrested for trespassing after they're told they need to leave. It's like, hey, you need to leave. And they're like, I ain't going nowhere. I'm staying right here. Do what I want. I'm a white man in America. Nick was arrested in Manatee County, Florida for refusing to leave. He also had possession of a controlled substance. Was he hit with a 1,000-foot business enhancement? No. Was he most likely arrested at a business? Yes. Was there a school or church or park within 1,000 feet? Probably. Did he get charged for it? No. And his crime is one of those crimes that you just have to scratch your head and wonder, why would you fail to leave a property after being told to leave if you have something illegal on you? And this is really the issue that many times the white population get overlooked. They can be belligerent. They can be outright insubordinate about their possession charges and the way they carry themselves with law enforcement and respecting businesses, parks, and other places. However, African Americans have to duck and hide for doing practically the same thing. Meet Kayla. She recently stole a car in Manatee County. You can clearly denote that she is dealing with the same type of issues, addiction. Meet William out of Manatee County. He failed to leave after receiving a warning to do so. Yes, it seems that many times when whites, particularly those dealing with addiction and homelessness, find themselves in a situation of getting arrested, it's their own insubordination and lack of failure to respect law enforcement or other people's orders that gets them arrested. But in the case of African Americans, when they are arrested on these charges, law enforcement hunts them down, finds them, and then makes sure to give them as many enhancements as possible. It's a very conflictive attitude for resolving the addiction crisis that is plaguing the white population in this area. When you're targeting somebody who isn't the main problem and you're turning a blind eye to the people who are clearly causing the problem, clearly suffering the most and hurting society the most because of their problem, how are you ever going to resolve this issue? It's like getting bitten by a poisonous snake and then getting a colonoscopy to make it better. Did you know that some snakes are poisonous while others are venomous? These words are many times used interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same thing. Meet Barry. He also failed to leave somewhere in Manatee County after receiving a warning to do so. Now meet James. Now I recently ran into James. I was at the Sam's in Bradenton, and this individual right here was arguing with the employees, telling the employees that they needed to refund his money or give him his food, even though nobody knew who took his order. He was very demanding and threatening. He was with another individual. Well, it turns out that this is something he does from business to business, and he was arrested for failure to leave after being warned by the owner, petty theft charges, and possession. So imagine that. He had possession on him. He walked into a business to kind of extort the business in a petty theft scheme he's got going on. On top of that, the owner asked him to leave and he refused to leave. They called law enforcement. He was arrested for possession as well. What's crazy about this individual is that I saw him previous day before he got arrested running the same exact scheme at a different place. Basically, he walks into a business, demands that they either refund him his money or that they give him a product that he paid for and didn't receive. He does it aggressively, harasses the customers, makes a scene, and then when he leaves angrily. He does that repetitively from business to business with a partner of his, and it eventually got him arrested in Bradenton. What's crazy is that he apparently does this repetitively over and over at different businesses, since I ran into him doing this at a business. Very disturbing. I'm just trying to eat my food, and here he is at the register screaming at the employees, threatening the employees, telling them that they need to refund his money or find his order that didn't exist. Now, while I don't know at the exact business that this individual was arrested, and obtaining this information is practically impossible because the Manatee County Sheriff's Office has the worst records department on earth, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were to find the place where he was actually arrested at, the actual arrest location, that it is possible that he was within 1,000 feet of a church or a school or a park. So I called the Manatee Sheriff's Office Records Department. I talked to a young lady by the name of Ashley who gave me the address of where this individual was arrested, the Wawa gas station that is on 14th Street and 53rd in Bradenton, Florida. Is it within 1,000 feet of a church? Yeah, it is within 997 feet of a church. So it is within 1,000 feet of a church. A place called the Throne of Grace, I believe. There's also another church that's about 1,200 feet away, and I believe that's an adult home over there, which I think is one of the protected types of places where you're not supposed to. There's also a hospital there. Do you think this guy is going to receive enhancements for his possession charge for being within 1,000 feet of a church? Absolutely not. Why? Because he's not black. What's crazy is that I just happened to randomly pick a random arrest. The first one that I found was within 1,000 feet of a church. Did this guy get the criminal enhancement? No. This is like the first one I picked out. This guy had possession within 1,000 feet of a church, and they didn't charge him with it because he's white. But if he had been black, he would have been charged with it. This is what's crazy about this law, is that I randomly just happened to pick this guy simply because I seen him running the same scheme at the place where I was at, and he later got arrested for running the scheme somewhere else. I picked him at random, and he was within 1,000 feet of a church and didn't receive the criminal enhancement. So part of profiling isn't exactly who you're targeting, but how many other people you overlooked before you decided to target somebody for the same thing that you've been overlooking time and time again. The situation in the state of Florida with racial profiling at this point is systematic and endemic to the system, and I don't think my video is going to make any type of difference, but it is just to inform you and the public how this works. And of course, you shouldn't be doing these criminal activities to begin with. One way to not get this criminal enhancement is to not engage in these activities. The issue isn't whether it's right or wrong. We know these activities are wrong. But what I want to show you in today's video is that I just randomly picked a white person that got arrested with possession within 1,000 feet of a church, and they didn't charge him for it. But then, under the same category, 60, 80, 90 to 100% of people that are charged with this enhancement just happen to be black in a county where black people are less than 10% of the population as of today. And remember, everybody watching today's video, I'm not an activist, I'm a journalist. I'm not changing the world, I'm just informing you of how these things work. But it's crazy to think that the first white person that I picked at random, and I called the Manatee Sheriff's Office to get the address of the arrest, happens to be within 1,000 feet of a church and didn't get that charge. That should just give you an idea how prolific this problem is and how specific the targeting is when it comes to arresting people under this pretext. And I know the real issue here underlying is that many of the dealers that are pushing the poison are African American, and that's not undeniable. It is normal for different races to be proportionately more likely to end up doing certain things. Take the case of whites, they're more likely to consume than other people. So this is analytical, it's not disputable. But at the same time, is it 10 times as much? Is it 7 times as much, or is it 30 or 20% as much? That's the real question that we have to answer here, because it seems that when it comes to systematic racism in Florida, it is so entrenched in the legal system that even when the analytics clearly point to you have a problem, this is an abnormality, even pointing it out doesn't change anything. This is the way the United States works. where racism is systematic and it's part of the institution itself. Me making this video, again, makes no difference. Again, I'm not an activist, I'm a journalist. If you like this video, not too long ago, I think a month or two ago, I just did another video on a similar topic to this regarding Henry and DeSoto County, and we found the same inconsistencies. There, African Americans are being charged disproportionately with these enhancements, while the whites commit the same exact crimes. And there, even the bail amounts are different for whites and blacks. So the system here of incarcerating African Americans hasn't changed. This is a problem that people understand is endemically plaguing the United States, at how African Americans are constantly being targeted by law enforcement, constantly being incarcerated at rates that are just ridiculously higher than everybody else. Even though the types of crimes, if you look at the analytics for propensity, they're less propense to commit those crimes than other people. In the case of Florida now, we've also seen a huge increment in arrests of Hispanics, as they're targeting Hispanics. Now in Florida, law enforcement is able to make immigration arrest. Even though they have barely any training, they're allowed to act as immigration agents and detain people. This is also going to lead to now Hispanics. It's already happening in Collier County. They went from Hispanics being 20 to 30% of their arrests, about roughly the same as their county population. So now many days of the week, Hispanics are 60 to 80% of the people they're arresting. And in Collier County, Hispanics are not 80% of the population. But this is the state of Florida. This is the South, a place where profiling, and it isn't what you do, the sad thing about the situation is that justice should be equal for everybody. Everybody should be treated the same, but when it comes to law enforcement and incarceration, they want certain people's lives to fail. In an ideal world, it's the people who break the law who should have consequences and penalties, but in reality, it's not who committed the crime, but who they want to incarcerate. A while back, there was a case in St. Petersburg, Florida, where an African American was a victim of a person trying to hit them with a car. He called the cops, and many times one of the biggest issues with racial inequality in law enforcement isn't who gets arrested, but who doesn't get arrested. Is a bigger picture than anything. It's an African American who denounced a white person for trying to hit them with a car. The police officer came, didn't seem too interested in doing anything about the situation. In fact, the police officer used racial slurs to the person who called to make the complaint. He got it on video, and they gave him the dignity of deciding whether he wanted to quit or be fired. They didn't fire him. They gave him the respect and dignity of saying, do you want to be fired or do you want to denounce your position? That is how they treated the officer who on video called an African American a racial slur when he was trying to report somebody hitting him with a vehicle. That is the real problem. And this is what people don't understand about racial profiling. It isn't who's being arrested. It's actually who's being overlooked, that many times when African Americans and Hispanics denounce a white person committing a crime against them, the law enforcement is hesitant to do anything about it. And it has to be not on the police officers. And I've been in these situations and I've seen these situations, and it's almost like the police officers are afraid of taking it to the court system. What are these police officers afraid of? Why are police officers afraid of taking a black victim against a white perpetrator to a legal procedure? I don't understand what the fear is, why law enforcement officers are afraid of making this happen. But I've been there, I've seen police officers with all the evidence in front of them with their hands shaking, with a pen in their hand, because they're afraid of denouncing a white person for hurting a Hispanic or black, which means that when whites victimize Hispanics or blacks, the chances of criminal prosecution are almost annulled. In St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where Pinellas County sits, you recently had a person who ran to be a mayor of the city, and part of his mayoral campaign was telling black people to go back to Africa. It's on video. You can actually look this up. It's absolutely insane that this guy was running for a public position promoting the notion of sending people back to Africa for being black. But this should just give you an idea of how open and blatant discrimination is in this part of Florida. And unfortunately, it isn't even the worst place out there. There's places where it's worse, but it has become a serious concern in the state of Florida that if you are a minority, you are more propense to be arrested, many times by the 100%, considerably more. But the worst part isn't when you're being arrested and targeted, because at the end of the day, you committed a crime. So the real sad thing is that when you're the victim and you try to persecute someone who has victimized you, if that victim is a minority and that perpetrator is white, your chances of getting the law and having a police officer actually denounce that person practically don't exist. This is the shameful state of Florida. And again, these are clearly spelled out. We use real analytics. We looked at real arrest reports. You can go to the Pinellas County website and the Manatee County website and do a find on this page, or you can manually scroll for that option and receive the information, and you'll see that everything I'm telling you is factual and accurate and recent relevant information, not to what happened 20 or 50 years ago, but what's happening today in 2025 in the state of Florida.